I'm Matt Carey, documentary editor at Deadline. We have for you now a really beautiful, immersive film, Jim Henson, Idea Man, directed by Ron Howard. And the director, the Oscar winner, Emmy winner, Ron Howard, joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure, Matt.
So, Ron, we know you for your work in narrative film, the Oscar-winning A Beautiful Mind. We know you for Apollo 13, so many other films and documentaries. Before we get into the conversation, let's take a look at a clip from Jim Henson, Idea Man.
Hello there, my name is Jim Henson, and I'm a puppeteer.
Sesame Street. The Muppets. Dark Crystal. Labyrinth. Jim created out of innocence.
He showed people the good in all of us.
Is this a 9-to-5 job?
Yeah, it's every moment of one's life kind of job, those things.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows? And what's on the other side?
From a very early age, he had the feeling that he was here for a purpose.
Holy.
Characters come about from many different ways. It was my mother's coat and a ping pong ball. That's how it all started.
He had so many ideas and so many things he wanted to do. His inner life must have been sparkling.
The space he gave to an expression of imagination, I see that in everything that he did.
I love you.
I love you too.
Thanks.
Rainbows are visions, but only illusions.
There was nothing that Jim didn't entertain.
And everything was getting a little bit bigger.
Becoming famous was what he wanted, that there was an innocence getting lost. Was going to impact his relationship with us and everything, and that was complex.
He wanted to do more than is humanly possible.
That idea that time could run out
was just unthinkable.
If Jim was here, I just have to thank him.
Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
Many people know you do so much work in documentary as well as narrative. What about Jim Henson's story intrigued you that you wanted to make a film about him?
Well, when the subject was presented to me by our doc team at Imagine, I found myself immediately intrigued and curious about Jim, because I'd met him briefly. I knew people who knew him very well, who held him in such high esteem. He was a very modest guy, but at an immediate first glance, I still didn't realize the scope of what he had accomplished in, his 53 short years, far too short, and so I was curious about this sort of explosion of creativity, and, what was the engine behind him and it, and, and I knew he was passionate about his work. Everyone knew that, but I sort of didn't know where this kind of outlier mentality came from, combined with this extraordinary just amount of work. And I honestly began to think about Picasso, who seemed driven to sort of, once he was established, to sort of get his work out there, and other fine artists. And it was really just as simple as being curious about it. I had a couple of initial conversations with several of his children, family members, and had a chance to actually start seeing the breadth of his work. And first of all, like there are a lot of things I hadn't seen, like these hilarious, crazy, irreverent commercials that he would, which are what first got him sort of noticed in the mainstream and allowed him be this sort of experimental artist in the early years of his life. They were crazy, but I also got to see that the creativity for him never stopped. It existed in his home movies. It existed in sort of all of his drawings. It existed in his notebooks that weren't sketches for design necessarily. They were just him keeping track of things, and even those were reflections of this creative energy, and it just dazzled me. And honestly, I wanted to celebrate it. I wanted to get to the bottom of what made him tick, and his children wanted, they're storytellers too. They wanted an honest understanding of their father and his work and his life. But I just recognized that there was so much behind the name Jim Henson and the characters that are iconic for us, that I thought was interesting to me, and I wanted to share it.
There have been a number of documentaries about, for instance, some Muppets, and in fact, Frank Oz, who is such an important part of your film. He directed a film not too many years ago that get into that. But it's such an achievement in your film because we learned so many things, I think, that we didn't know about Jim Henson. So many revelations, including, at least to me, that he didn't really set out to be a puppeteer. He wasn't as a 6-year-old doing things. In some ways, it was like, all right, this is the available avenue into television, and it's the relatively early days of television. So that right there is one of the revelations.
Yeah, and that was a discovery for me too, because when I began reading about him and really doing the research, once I was committed to directing the film, that was a surprise, and it's also a kind of a lesson. And look, his life is a sort of an object lesson. I think he lived with a kind of, it was outwardly chaotic, but I think there was real intention in the choices he made. He lived with a lot of integrity and a lot of commitment to using his time, which from very early on in his life was very precious to him. And the film reveals, why that, he may have been so driven by a sense of the fleeting nature of life, and he was trying to grab at every moment. But it's fascinating that despite his sort of intention to live a certain way and be a certain person and live by some particular standards creatively and as a human being on the planet, he also was opportunistic. And it's very interesting to see near misses. Like, what if he hadn't done Sesame Street? That didn't necessarily happen. Muppets was incredibly hard to sell. It's mind-boggling, but we take you through the journey of, and then of course along the way we remember his work in these, in these glowing terms. It wasn't always received that way, and yet he just kept coming back. So there's a kind of a durability and a kind of an opportunistic excitement as he would latch on to ideas and find a reason to believe in them.
I wondered, for you at beginning your career, of course, as an on-camera performer, in some ways we don't think of Jim Henson as an actor, as a voice actor, as a physical actor, and such a physical work that is with puppetry. But we do get, I certainly did get a strong sense of that. Like, he's also a singer. He's doing so much. And I just wondered, as your background as a performer, what your thoughts are about him as a creative force in performing, on top of filmmaking.
I've known a few performers who go unnamed, but who are brilliant performers on camera, on stage, but they didn't really begin thinking of themselves as performers. They weren't that kind of personality that needed to be out there, out in front. But intellectually, emotionally, they knew how to execute the ideas and what they they were really sort of conceptual and idea generators, and very detailed about that. I think Jim, falls firmly in that category. I think that, living in his head, and somehow he learned how to perform. That was another great surprise as we started really looking through all the archival footage, was how many great moments that we could find that could demonstrate the artistry of puppetry, the agony of it, like the contortions that they have to go through to even get the puppets in these positions. You just take all this stuff for granted, but the timing and the rehearsal and the performance and the discipline to sort of express yourself in these really entertaining ways through these puppets, and in ways that were fresh, exciting, smart, ultimately educational. I mean, he used the art form in such a broad way. And it's interesting to see him beginning to just want to be zany and kooky. He could make money selling products with his zany, kooky puppets, and slowly but surely he just began to recognize that, they could mean more, and still be fun. I mean, he was always trying to entertain with them, and I think that's a good reminder. I think there are a lot of interesting lessons along the way, without the film ever being on a soapbox, because Jim Henson certainly never was. But I think there's a lot to be inspired by. It was fun for me as a director to begin to look at his life, look at these films, look at his home movies, look at, again, as I said, the way he and Jane decorated their house. I mean, all these things, and look at them as a creative team in addition to being a husband and wife, but it really informed what I wanted the style of the movie to be. I wanted this documentary to not only be comprehensive, to be honest, but I also wanted it to try to capture as much of that spirit. It's kind of a chaotic energy that winds up getting focused into moments, ideas, feelings that really can land for an audience. And it was really fun to try to sort of channel Jim's aesthetic and sensibility into the way we were going to present this movie. And Dave Fleming did a great job with the score. Without occasionally we'd use a theme or something from the Muppets or Jim's World, but he was also doing a great job of finding that sort of tone that Jim could often find that was just so right to help energize a moment. Jim loved music, and I really like our score in our film.
Yeah, I think there's really wonderful use of the score, and it's to my mind, the most visually inventive documentary that you've made.
It really did invite that through Jim's energy, and everybody, all of the producing team, and Sarah, Neil, and Paul Crowder, our editors, picked up on that, and we had great archive to find.
Oh yeah,
on behind the scenes as well as on camera stuff going back into the 50s.
And one of the, to me, fascinating pieces of archive, and it almost to some degree bookends the film, is Orson Welles, of all people, interviewing Jim and Frank Oz, and obviously being a tremendous admirer of their work. But and for this, I guess, television special, but there's a live audience there, and it's.
I think, from what I understand, he was. They were thinking about trying to do a regular talk / variety show that Orson would host, and
wow,
he chose Jim and Frank to be in this pilot episode. So I'm not sure it's ever really been seen.
I certainly had never heard of that, and it is just delightful with that stentorian voice of Orson Welles, talking about the Muppets
and how passionate he is about them.
The film is Jim Henson Idea Man. We have been joined by the Oscar-winning, Emmy-winning director Ron Howard. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Matt. Bye-bye.